This is Dan Seifert with mobileburn.com, and this is a look at the Sony Xperia Ion for AT&T. The Sony Xperia Ion is the first smartphone to come to the US since Sony dropped the Ericsson from its name late last year. It is also the company's first smartphone to support a 4G LTE network. The Xperia Ion features an all-black chassis with a brushed metal backside. Its square corners and angular lines are in stark contrast to what we see on phones like HTC's One X and Samsung's Galaxy S3, and it does look very Sony. Ergonomically, however, the sharp edges make the 10.2mm thick phone a bit more difficult to manage than the other devices. The front of the phone is dominated by a 4.6-inch HD display that features 1280 by 720 pixels of resolution. The display is sharp, but it's also a perfect example of high resolution not being the only factor in making a great smartphone screen. The colors are not nearly as vibrant as on other smartphones, and despite having Sony's mobile Bravia engine for improved images, viewing angles are pretty terrible. Above the display is a 1.3 megapixel front-facing camera and a multicolor notification light. Below it you can see keys for capacitive keys for menu, home, back, and search. The keys themselves are not backlit, but rather a thin LED strip is positioned under each button, and it can be rather difficult to see. The keys can also be extremely frustrating to use, since it appears that the touch-sensitive area is about 2 mm above each key's label. Along the right side of the Ion are buttons for a dedicated camera key, volume rocker, and power sleep unlock key. The buttons have good travel and feedback, and the camera key is a dual-stage unit, but all of them are far smaller than they really need to be, making them hard to locate when you're not looking directly at the phone. On the other side of the phone, you'll find a micro USB charging and syncing port and micro HDMI port hidden under the protective plastic flap. The back of the Ion features a brushed aluminum finish flanked by rubberized plastic caps at the top and bottom for antennas. The aluminum section is very prone to collecting fingerprints and general grossness, which is a bit frustrating and unexpected. At the top of the back, in the center, you'll find the 12 megapixel camera, LED flash, and external speaker. The top plastic piece is removable and provides access to the micro SIM card tray and micro SD card slot. Inside the Ion itself is a 1900 mAh battery that's not user accessible. And despite the battery's really large capacity, the Ion gets pretty deplorable battery life, frequently tapping out around 8 hours of normal usage. Inside, the Xperia Ion features a dual-core Qualcomm Snapdragon S3 processor clocked at 1.5 GHz and paired with 1 GB of RAM. The processor is not the new S4 chip seen in the latest and greatest smartphones on the market today, and that becomes painfully obvious the more you use the phone. As you use the phone during the day, animations become choppy, the interface becomes laggy, and the general performance of the Ion is just frustrating a lot of the time, which is not really something that we would expect to see from a mid to high-end smartphone that's coming to the market in the middle of 2012. The Ion does hold its own when it comes to 3D gaming though, so you can use it for most popular gaming titles. The Xperia Ion runs Android 2.3.7 Gingerbread, which is disappointing to say the least. Not only do you not get the performance benefits that come with Android 4.0, but you also don't get access to the latest Google apps or the Chrome beta web browser. That said, Sony has added some of the Android 4.0 features into its custom interface that's on top of Gingerbread. You can access certain notifications from the lock screen, you can drag and drop icons to create folders on the home screens, and you can change the shortcuts that are in the main dock. The app tray itself features the ability to uninstall apps directly, and you can customize the sorting options there. And then finally, there's also a screenshot function that's available by long pressing the power key. One cool thing that Sony has built into the Ion is a TV interface for when you're plugged into an HD TV through a micro HDMI cable. You can use the interface to launch apps, browse pictures, access the web, check your email, and you can also even access the phone's home screens, so you can do pretty much anything that you could do on your phone when it's not connected to the TV. It works pretty well, and it's pretty neat, and as a bonus, you can even control it using your TV's remote, even if your TV isn't actually made by Sony. The web browser on the Xperia Ion is pretty much a standard Android 2.3 browser. It supports pinch to zoom and Adobe Flash Player, and it loads pages pretty quickly, but the experience once pages are loaded is pretty choppy, especially when you're scrolling and zooming. It's definitely not the smoothest experience that we've seen on a smartphone these days. Sony's putting a lot of emphasis on the camera features here on the Ion, and a lot of them are pretty cool, and the camera does work pretty well. The camera app can actually be launched directly from the home or the lock screen in just 1.5 seconds by holding down the camera key, and you can even set it to immediately take a picture once the camera has launched. The interface is pretty basic, with access to a variety of settings through the menu button and through some on-screen buttons. And the Ion features an intelligent automatic mode that tries to automatically determine what your subject is before you take the picture. And it includes things like face detection and smile detection that Sony has put on their line of digital cameras. Oddly enough, it lacks tap to focus, so you have to press the on-screen shutter button or hold the physical key halfway to do any sort of pre-focusing. But focus and shot-to-shot times are really pretty quick, and the pictures themselves are pretty good with a good amount of detail and accurate colors. But there can be quite a bit of noise when you zoom in. And unfortunately, it seems like the 12 megapixel resolution is a bit more than the phone's processor can handle when you're browsing through photos, as it takes a long time to load up previews. The Ion can also shoot 1080p video, but it doesn't have continuous autofocus or the ability to snap stills while you're shooting video that some of the other phones on the market have. The video is pretty choppy as well, and though Sony says it's image stabilized, it certainly doesn't feel like it, and it's definitely not the smoothest video. The Xperia Ion is going to be hitting AT&T shelves on June 24th for $99.99 with a new 2-year contract. Really, the most appealing thing about the Ion is probably its price, because you do get a lot of high-end specs and a large screen for not very much money these days. But there's a lot of other things that you should consider or make you pause when you're looking at the Ion. The inconsistent performance, sometimes frustrating hardware, and the really dated software are all things that are disappointing to see and can make for a poor user experience when you're using the Ion. And to be honest with you, as Sony's first effort here in the US, I have to say that the Ion comes up quite disappointing. For more on the Xperia Ion, be sure to check out our full written review at mobileburn. This is Dan Seifert from mobileburn.com. Thanks for watching.